Post-game is presented by Belfour Property Restoration. Joe Musso alongside Bryant McFadden. Mac, after one like that, I'm not sure where we begin, so let's work backwards. And I want to start with that third possession. Both teams have touched the ball. You know, a tie gets you into the postseason. Too conservative, the play calling there for you from Denver?
No question. It felt like Denver was like the game is over when York missed that makeable field goal. At that moment, there was the opportunity to not necessarily score any points, but work the clock, get into your 4-minute offense where you're utilizing the clock, even though the Cincinnati Bengals at that time, they had 2 timeouts along with the 2-minute warning. But for Denver, if you look at the play call, and the sense of urgency wasn't there. And at that moment, I said they're going to lose this ball game because 2 things happened. Number 1, you didn't work the yards. You didn't get any positive yards. You didn't work any clock. You gave the Cincinnati Bengals the football in an ideal situation with enough time to do what they did, which was score a touchdown. And we all saw it. We all witnessed it. Coach was not going to settle for a field goal. They were fighting like they were down 5 points, like they needed a touchdown. And guess what? He put the football, Zach Taylor put the football in the best player's hand, Joe Burrow. And unfortunately for Joe Burrow, if they were not 8-8, he would be in that MVP conversation because the job he has done just in the month of December when they were fighting from behind, when you look at the win-loss record, when you look at everything up against them in terms of playoff implications, he never blinked. He just performed like a superhero. And once again, he put his cape on and he saved the city.
Man, Burrow in this game was everything his team needed to be. And when his kicker couldn't be that, he leads that final drive. 5 overtime possessions, not something you see. We see it in this instance, and it ends with a third T. Higgins touchdown. Those two were on the same page throughout this game. Jamar Chase shut down mainly by Patrick Surtain in this game. It was a great game plan defensively by the Broncos, but now they have to do what has plagued them so often, and that's beat the Kansas City Chiefs to control their own destiny in a Week 18. Let's say the Chiefs are sitting Patrick Mahomes, which we assume they will be, probably sitting Travis Kelce. I don't know if they're a favorite in that game, but if you're the Broncos coming off of this, what do you feel like and how do you pick yourself back up?
Well, this is the bed you made. Now you have to sleep in it, even if you have no sheets, because you had an opportunity to sleep rather nicely tonight, but you dropped the ball. Now you're in a March Madness type scenario, right? You lose, you go home. This was a winnable opportunity. Your rookie quarterback, he was battle tested. He made plays, but then they would miss opportunity as well, not to mention the play calling. I questioned the play calling because in that scenario that we talked about in overtime, your defense was battle tested. They fought. They gave you an opportunity to seal the game, to close the game. You did not. Now you have to look forward to playing against the best team in the National Football League, even without Pat Mahomes potentially not playing. I don't know. I'm just throwing out a hypothetical. We don't know if we will see 87 and Travis Kelce. What about Isaiah Pacheco? We don't know. Chris Jones, we don't know. But one thing I do know, we will see Andy Reid. One thing I do know, they will be highly prepared. And one thing I do know, being that you're a divisional foe of the Kansas City Chiefs, the thing they would like to do most in finalizing and just winning out this regular season, being able to kick dirt on your playoff hopes in the Denver Broncos. And these are the situations you don't want to be in because anything can happen in a 4-quarter ball game. We just saw that tonight. But this is the bed they must lay in, even with no sheets. You got to lay in it because you made this bed. So everything is on the line now for the Denver Broncos next week in Denver.
A bed with no sheets can be mighty cold, and it could be
no bed with no sheets.
Cold end of the season. It would be on a losing streak that would keep Denver out. But again, a win and you're in. That has been the case for these last few weeks, and it remains the case heading into Week 18 against the Kansas City Chiefs, who have already locked up that 1 seed. I said that Jamar Chase was largely held in check. We're still looking at 9 from 102, 131 for T. Higgins and those 3 touchdowns. Let's take a look at the path to the playoffs for Cincinnati, because we looked at this a couple weeks ago and we said you can see the path. They still need the help. It's a win against your Steelers in Week 18. They need the Broncos to lose to the Chiefs in that game. The Dolphins could lose either in Week 17 or Week 18.
Which could happen.
And the same can be said for the Colts, who are turning to a different quarterback again. I know the odds say it's not likely to happen. But the dominoes, another one has fallen, and this is a team that if they make the playoffs can be a very live dog and a problem for anybody that they see. Let's get back into this game because clock management wasn't a strong suit on either side. What did you make of the way that this game ended in regulation? Both teams, again, looking like they weren't willing to bet, rather check. And you see Sean Payton not go for two. Wanted to go for two, then we had a review, then he didn't. Where did you process that decision, and was it the right one at the end of the day?
Well, for Sean Payton not going for two, it was the right decision because a tie would still get them into the playoffs. And I think he realized that on the sideline from his staff and basically said, it doesn't make sense to try to go for two because if we don't get the two, we lose the ball game. But if we go into overtime and no one scores, we still achieve the playoff goal.
I will say this is American football, and that's what happens when you play for a tie.
Yes. Yeah, but mathematically speaking, that was the right decision. Now, in terms
game
of
theory says take that tie.
Yeah, now in terms of Cincinnati, when Chase Brown went out with that injury, clearly he was trying to fall before crossing the goal line. He got injured. Since he had to utilize a timeout, the clock stopped, and the next play they scored a touchdown. I felt like there lies the opportunity to take a knee because you wanted Denver to do what? Utilize their last timeout. They utilized their last timeout. Now it's third down. Now you can run another play and still milk as much clock as possible. So whenever you score, regardless if it's 3 points or a touchdown, they don't have any timeouts, and now they're clearly below a minute. It's under a minute to do whatever they were able to do. But because they had that timeout, which was massive for them, if you look at how the sequence of plays worked out right before regulation, they utilized that timeout to set up the fourth down conversion. Outstanding throw by Bo Nix that led to the game going into overtime. Listen, how you look at how the game started, Joe, it was the highs and lows, but in the second half, it was great. It was entertaining play. Both quarterbacks made plays. Both defenses made timely plays. This was what you wanted this game to be in the second half. And unfortunately, someone had to lose. And the team that lost, I'm going to say this, they were deserving of losing. Yeah. Because they had opportunity to win this ball game in the Denver Broncos.
It was punch, counter punch, and in the end, a team waiting for that final bell because they thought they had the decision in the form of that tie, and you wait a little too long and you end up suffering a knockout loss at the end. Not a knockout in terms of playoff, but in terms of what this game could have meant for the Denver Broncos. Let's keep working backwards, and I want to talk about this battle in the trenches, one that was won by Denver. They got to Joe Burrow in this game to no fault of this offensive line, and I know they take responsibility here, but how dominant of a group is that, and how important is that when you look to Week 18 against the Chiefs?
They were overly dominant, and the thing I love about the Denver Broncos, this is who they've been defensively the entire year. Remember, they've been the top team in terms of sacking opposing quarterbacks, #1 in the National Football League, and they improve on those said stats today. But the thing about Joe Burrow that you have to respect, you can hit him, you can beat him up, you can sack him, you can throw him down. He does not blink. He's one of the few quarterbacks in the National Football League. When the house is on fire, he never panics. He looks, he finds water, and he throws water on any flame that he sees. And that's what we saw. He's one of the tougher quarterbacks in the National Football League. And I'll say this too, when you look at the National Football League and some of the high-level quarterbacks, Joe Burrow is one of the few that can be successful without running the football. It was like, we don't want to run the football. And Chase Brown had success, but it was like Zach Taylor said, no, I'm throwing the football. And I was hollering at the TV. I don't have a dog in the race, but I love to see honest football being played the right way. Yeah. Inside the 5-yard line, he's going to rely on his quarterback. That's who he is. So, you know, they always say dance with the date you went to the prom with. They got to this moment in the season because they relied on Joe Burrow, and he's not going to deter. He's going to stay the course with Joe Burrow. And Joe Burrow, once again, because we talked about how good the Broncos defense was. We talked about the job that Pat Surtain did against Jamar Chase. We talked about the 7 sacks the Denver Broncos had on Joe Burrow. Joe still threw for 412 yards and 3 touchdowns.
And the rushing touchdown was his too.
And then the rushing touchdown. He had 4 total touchdowns. He was sacked 7 times.
All right, let's go deeper on it then, Mac, because it is time now for the Belfour Player of the Game, and I feel like it could be a formality here. Who gets it?
Joe! I don't know how Joe Cool does what he does. It's cooler than a polar bear's toenail. He has earned that nickname, Joe Cool.
Yeah.
Because for you to be sacked 7 times, eventually you might see some ghosts. You might hear footsteps, even when footsteps are not there. But Joe's like, no, I don't care nothing about those footsteps. You can hit me. I remember one play in the 3rd quarter, the blitz was coming. He stood there, looked down the barrel of that gun and said, I'm going to deliver a strike to T. Higgins. This man does not flinch. He has no nerves. You cannot rattle an individual who has no nerves. Good luck, because if they get into the playoffs, hold your breath.
We will see the road ahead for the Bengals. It's still alive. They're holding their breath for a little. You want me to?
Hold your breath.
Hold your breath.
You don't want them in.
Bengals ain't dead yet. That's been postgame presented by Belfort Property Restoration. Thank you, Mac.
You're a professional, Joe.
Here's a look at that AFC playoff picture. Everybody exhale, at least for the time being. I mean, a Broncos winning, we know our 7 teams. They locked themselves in. We're still waiting for that 7 seed. That could be the Bengals. That could be the Colts. That could be the Dolphins. All need a loss by the Broncos in Week 18 to those Chiefs. The Bengals, pertinent to this conversation, need a loss by the Broncos in Week 18, as well as a loss by the Colts or Dolphins. Each one of them one more in either Week 17 or Week 18.